I know, um, I know it's going to take a moment for everybody to filter in slowly but surely. Welcome in, welcome in. Take your time, pull up a desk for HillmanTok Sci 101. Come on in. I am Professor White, here to teach you psychology. I'm so excited to share my knowledge with you. Um, so, take your time as you slowly come in. I appreciate everybody for coming by and whatnot. We're just gonna, give it a couple minutes for people to get the notifications that I am in fact live. And I look forward to sharing information with you. I think I should be loud enough. I think you guys should hear me. But yeah. So welcome in. Definitely ask any questions that you may have as we go through Psych 101 here at HillmanTok. I will give you some background information about myself. I am Professor White. I have been teaching psychology in the psychology discipline for Mimi. Thank you so much. I'm happy that you are here. 17 years I've been teaching in the psychology discipline. Psychology 101 is my favorite class to teach. I've taught, group dynamics to, group dynamics to human sexuality, to personality psych, abnormal psych, child and adolescent abnormal psych, lifespan development, you named it. I have taught it in my 17 years here. I was lucky that I was able to receive 2 years of psychology in high school before I even moved into college. I've always had a passion for psychology, and I'm so happy to share that with others. And that's why I got into teaching, is being able to share that with others. I also work in the social services field. I have been working in that field for 22 years, 23 years, for so long. The particular population I have worked with is the intellectually disabled, developmentally disabled individuals. That is the particular population that I have kind of really focused my career around. Hi, Pauline. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you for being here. Excuse me. So that's a population that I have worked for. Thank you so much for hitting those likes on the live. It really helps more people to find it. So thank you so much. And I have enjoyed working in this field for the past over 2 decades. And I see myself completely finishing in this field, is being a psych professor and then working in social services with the individuals that have some type of, intellectual disability, developmental disability, so on and so forth. I've worked in case management. I've worked in group homes. I've worked it all, if you will. So thank you so much for sharing the live. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the likes. So I think we've given people enough moments. Thank you for all, any, what are they called? Not bits. What's it called? It's not bits on here. I forget what's the name. Thank you for any hearts, roses, and anything that you give. I truly appreciate that. Gifts. Thank you. I was like, I'm so used to on this platform it's bits, and that platform is that. It's that platform is that. Youngles, thank you so much for being here. Youngles is an amazing content creator who I've worked with for years. So thank you so much, Youngles. I appreciate you. Okay. So if you have questions, please ask them in the chat. I will try to answer them. Like I said in my video today, I'm going to, one, make this available on YouTube in case you miss anything. And two, the syllabus is a working document and I will be constantly updating it because I know we're not necessarily going to get through lecture 1 tonight. That is not going to happen. So we're going to take our time. We're going to go through the material and go from there. So thank you so much, everybody. Let's see. I got my little lecture notes right here because I am old school. But obviously, oh, I have a PowerPoint. I totally forgot I have a PowerPoint. Now I'm kind of mad. Okay. Remind me next time to please have my PowerPoint because I could totally have the PowerPoint going on here and I forgot, so I forgot. I have a PowerPoint for like all my classes. Yes, Youngles, please remind me because I totally forgot. I was all like, oh, let me get my lecture notes. Let me get this. And, you know, I had a meeting right before this, so. Okay, so let me give you the textbook definition of psychology. So we're going to dive right in. The textbook definition of psychology is basically the discipline with behavior and mental processes and how they are affected by organisms' physical state, their mental state, and the external environment. So what's inside, what's outside, their behaviors, and everything of that sort. Okay? So with that in mind, it's the why. Why do we act the way we act? Why do we think the things we think? And honestly, I think psychology should be completely a science, but some areas it is considered just an art. But I'm sorry, if you have to dive in and look at all the neurotransmitters in the brain, how they, any imbalances and how they can affect it, if there's any lesions on the brain, if any changes chemically, and you have to learn that, that makes it a science. I am sorry, but some schools put it as just a art, but I digress. We're not gonna get upset. We're gonna let it go. Okay, so that's the actual definition of psychology. So you're like, okay, that makes sense, Professor. So let me talk to you about pseudoscience. So this has the veneer of psychological and scientific sounding language, but it has no empirical evidence to support it. There's no research to support it. It fixes your everyday problems, but that's it. There's no actual science behind it. Okay? So a great example of that is when you see various online platforms talking about different ways to fix your life quick, how to, you know, get a significant other and keep them, and everything of that sort. Okay? There is no easy solution to that. So they'll throw around a lot of terms that sound good. And you might even have celebrities who write books on how you can improve your life. But then they don't actually do the research to support that information. They don't actually pull the peer-reviewed journals to support that information. So it's really important anytime you grab any self-help books or anything of that sort, look at the credentials of the person writing it. Look at what they're promising you. More than likely, it's not written by anybody who should be telling you how to raise your children. They don't have any support or studies that go with it, okay? It just sounds good. Okay. So it's all about utilizing information that is derived from observation, experimentation, and measurements. And that's what psychology really has done. And it's really about critical thinking. Psychology is all about critical thinking. It's taking that time to ask the questions, wonder about the world around you, and then how do we explain it? So it's really important as you continue on in this field to be that critical thinker for psychology. Okay, so I'm gonna ask the chat, like, this is what I would ask my students now. Are there any questions that you've ever been curious about in the world? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be psychology related. I'm going to give you guys a moment. If there's anything you've ever wondered about, you can go ahead and ask in the chat. It could be something small. It could be something big. It could be anything. Ooh, anything at all. So I'm going to give you guys a second to type in the chat if there's anything you ever wondered about. Go ahead. Don't be shy. Could mental illness be hereditary? Yes. I can answer that. Yes, it is. It is very much hereditary. It's a combo of nature and nurture. But certain mental disorders are hereditary. Schizophrenia is very high in heritability, and a lot of the disorders are. It's not guaranteed that you will manifest the same one, but there's a good possibility that you will manifest something. So that's a great question. I actually used to know off the top of my head all the numbers, like, oh, it's a 3 out of whatever, it's a 27% chance and things of that sort. Like if your mother has it versus your father, but if your father has it, this particular order, I used to have all those numbers in my head, but that's when I was heavy into teaching abnormal psych. Those numbers there's more psychology that I have forgotten than I could only imagine. Okay, so out of the blue, a show called Dr. Stone had both a scientist and psychologist to help humanity restart. Huh. Why is so much pseudoscience spread out in the world? Because it sounds good. RDX that told me about the Dr. Stone. Blue. Sorry. It sounds good and it's a quick fix. And that is why so much pseudoscience is out there. It's easy to sell. It's so easy to sell, especially if you know, right now we have a lot of upticks of podcasts talking about dating. It's so easy to sell how you can get your dream man or woman. It's a very good show. I have to check it out. Thank you. Hold on. Okay, off-putting asks, I'm super curious about blocked memories. Experience this. Does that have to do with psychology? Yes. So, we're going to talk about one of the psychological theories in a moment. If you're coming from a psychoanalysis standpoint, you can easily explain that. And then we're going to dive deeper into defense mechanisms, which is part of psychoanalysis. So basically, it's your brain protecting you from whatever memory you do not want. Is there a connection to how a narcissistic parent creates a child on the spectrum? So I would want you to expand a little bit more about that. There is no empirical evidence. Autism spectrum disorder versus narcissistic. I know they use the term a lot versus somebody who's actually has the narcissistic personality disorder. It's two different things. There isn't any empirical evidence that I'm aware of there being a connection, but I would love to dive deep into that, especially since there's such a rise of using that term. I'm sure there's even more up-to-date studies, and I'm such a dork. I love reading studies. Do I need to read it? No. Do I read it anyway? Yes. Do I now want to go find journals? Yes. I'm hoping somebody did a study. I'm hoping. I'm sorry, that was Macame. Sapphire Wolf, what about people think? Oh. Why? Okay, I see what you did there because you don't want to actually say the term. Why do people always think it's another defense mechanism. Thank you. It's you're going to try to protect yourself. You don't want to admit that something bad is happening. It's a step past denial. You don't want to admit that. So it's easier to live in a different world than to admit that somebody who is a loved one is doing something negative to you. Can a person with bipolar disorder have a functioning life as being married with a family? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Just because you have a diagnosis does not mean that you're unable to function. So it's all about how it is affecting your ability to live an everyday life and what your psychologists, psychiatrists, your whole treatment team need to work to get you to be as functioning as possible. I'm hoping there are studies, just an observation I've noticed. Yeah, I'm hoping that there are studies. I want to dive into that. I want to make sure. Okay. How do I deal with a child who has taken on an ego phase, lashing out due to abandonment? How old's the child? Like where are they at in their developmental stages? Is there any 14? Okay, so we're dealing with a teen. So, because I immediately, when you said child, I thought 5. I didn't think 14. Are they currently in therapy? Is the lashing out verbal or physical or both? I'm sorry, I'm like asking all these questions like. And then I think, okay, so is there any other diagnosis that they may have? 14 and verbal. Sorry, something just popped up. I was like, what was that? So thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the likes. I appreciate you. No therapy. Learning about we're prone to disassociation, and yes. If they have abandonment issues, I have a family member who was adopted into the family, and they continue to have abandonment issues from like their parents and things of that sort. So it is very important for therapy. They need therapy. That is the first approach. They need somebody that they're comfortable with talking to about the abandonment issues. It just has to happen. You can't avoid it. Of course, what are all these notifications? Remind me to turn off notifications for TikTok, because what are we doing? Yes, no problem. And I'm being very general because I don't know the child. I don't know enough about them. So just in a general case, again, I'm not going to diagnose anybody. Do not diagnose yourself. I can give you general information because I don't know, and I did not do an analysis and evaluation on the individual. So I'm just going based off of what information I have. So therapy is number one, especially for a teenager. They're able to verbalize their needs versus like somebody who's a little bit younger. We might do like a play therapy, but I would say a cognitive behavioral therapist would be great for a 14-year-old, because we want to challenge any of those maladaptive negative thoughts that they have and try to get them into a more positive space. So see, this is why I grew up with counselors and emotionally regulated than my elderly parents. It's tough. Yeah. What are your thoughts on self-diagnosis with, I would not. So with any diagnosis of any kind, I would sit down with a professional. So a lot of times, I know we're going to dive more into all of that when we talk about abnormal psych. There will be a whole lecture on that. A lot of times you have the disorder-like behaviors. It's really important that you meet all the diagnostic criteria, and we'll talk all about that in the future. There are key points that you have to meet to reach a diagnosis. So you might have some of the criteria, but you don't have enough to meet it. So you might have some of the behaviors. You might, like a lot of people diagnose themselves with OCD, and you might have some of the behaviors, but you don't have the diagnosis because you don't meet the criteria. You just might have some of it. And it might be like, you're close to it, but we can't actually say that. So some type of psychosis, but you're not meeting, like you could be a mix between 2 or 3. So that's why it's always important. Sit down, go to an actual licensed individual and get the proper diagnosis if you're interested in it. Some people don't want that. As an adult, they don't want that. And I understand. That's something that we discuss as labels and the impact. So I totally understand that. So as we talked more about the science behind psychology, just to get back on track, you're still welcome to ask questions. Psychology did not start scientifically based at all. I'm sorry. I love psychology, but they were doing some interesting things in the beginning. So in the 1800s, they were doing phrenology, which is when you basically study the bumps on people's heads. And that's how you could tell if they had some type of disorder. And then they would do bloodletting to help get out any bad blood that they may have. So we didn't start scientifically at all. So some people can't afford it. Okay, if they do not have any medical coverage of any kind, there's a couple ways to approach it. If the person's in crisis, one way to get around it is for you to call 911, and you will then get your diagnosis that way. You might end up on a 72-hour hold, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But you'll be surprised at how many psychologists and psychiatrists actually do a sliding scale and will let you pay what you can. So shop around. You'll be surprised. I've worked with a lot of different people, and you will get a sliding scale, and they'll be like, okay, I know you can only pay this much, and they'll do it. Okay? Be hard for adults and minorities to get autism if you are. So in terms of that, Trig, it's really important if you can find, there's studies on that. If you can find somebody who has the same ethnic background as you to do the diagnosis. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to find somebody, but they find that the diagnoses are usually more correct when the person has the same background as you. Sapphire. I'm sorry. What did Sapphire say? Sorry. Okay. All right. Yeah. So it might be hard, but again, some therapists and psychologists will offer a sliding scale for anybody who can't afford it. So, but you have to shop around. It's not easy. And I know in some areas there is like a medical desert. I know we talk about food deserts, but there's medical deserts and it's hard to get around. But there's a lot of telehealth now available, which is amazing. That's not something we had before the pandemic, but now you have more options for telehealth. So just, again, do your research. Do not accept just any old body. Do your research and make sure they have their credentials. I'm sure you've seen in the news about a few like fake dentists out there, fake doctors and everything like that who had a full practice with workers and everything, billing Medicaid. Do your research. Can hide mass. Okay, sorry, because you, yes. So a lot of times So excuse me, I'm sorry, I apologize. A lot of times that's something that we always discuss, especially for children. If there's any behavioral outbursts, first thing to do is rule out any medical, rule out any medical, rule out any environmental influences before you give a psychological diagnosis. So if there is some type of that happening in the home, if there might be some other bodily issues in which we're going to actually talk about that, you want to rule all those out. Okay. So 3 early psychological theories. Thank you everybody for coming in. I appreciate that. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the gifts. You guys are amazing. First theory. So we're going to give you the history. It's structuralism by E.B. Titchener. It was around 1867 to 1927. So we're going back in time. And basically they hope to analyze sensations, images, and feelings into basic elements. Okay? So they wanted us to understand the world around us, but it was very limited. So once we understood the concept of the color purple, that's where it stopped. It did not ask the question why. There's constant studies on that, Hammy. There's so many studies. And there's so much we just do not know. So that's the problem with the brain, is despite how much we have learned, there's still too much we do not know. There's so much we don't know. Some disorders is very clear that there's chromosome issues, there's neurotransmitter imbalances, there's this, there's that. But, and there's different types of, like, there's Rett syndrome and this and that, and those are genetically based, but they have elements of autism, so they were all combined. So we don't have enough about that yet. Still trying to study it. So there's a lot of guesses out there, but we still don't have a definitive, this is it. Yes, it did become a spectrum with the DSM-5. I have to think of my numbers. DSM-5 is when it became a spectrum. Before we had autistic disorder, we had Asperger's, it was like 5 or 6 disorders that they combined to one autism spectrum disorder because they shared a lot of similar diagnostic criteria. I'm just all over the place. I'm sorry, y'all. As you guys ask the questions, I'm like, oh yeah, there. If there's ever a question I don't immediately know the answer to, I will try to write it down, and or you guys could please follow me on YouTube and then ask the question in the YouTube comment so I can come back to it to give you an answer after I've done my research. When you say peer counselors, what do you mean by that? Sapphire, excuse me. I'm sorry. I apologize. I meant to, yeah, Sapphire, let me know what you mean by how do you define peer counselors? Because that term might mean something, it might be a different term for me. So we talked about structuralism. So structuralism died out in the 1930s. So once you break down how one perceives the environment, you couldn't go from there. Some clinics have what they call peer counselors. Okay. I'm going to guess at what those might be. They might just be people of the similar age groups, but they don't have any actual, like, training. I'm guessing. I really don't know. I'm guessing that they don't have any actual training. Thank you for the 11K likes. Thank you for all the gifts. Amazing. Thank you so much. Are they like TAs? Yeah, it doesn't sound like they might not be. It might be just a safe space and a friend for them to talk to, but not necessarily somebody who has the degrees behind them. I'm just guessing based off of the name. I'm not quite sure what those are. I know sometimes they'll have those in high schools, something similar to that, in which you kind of have a buddy that signed up with you. Okay, see, I was a peer counselor in high school. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Pauline. Okay, so next of our early psychological theories is functionalism by William James. It happened from 1842 to about 1910. It emphasized the purpose of behavior and as opposed to its analysis. So it asked the question why. So that was good. We finally are starting asking questions because we didn't before that. And it also broadened the field to include children and animals. So think about it. It wasn't until 1910 that we realized that children and animals have feelings, have emotions. We did not, in any of our studies, any of our thoughts, we did not explore that children and animals. So how many in the people in the chat have animals? Go ahead if you just want to put a 1 in the chat that you have an animal. I'm sure you have noticed how happy your dog is when you get home. I'm sure you've noticed when they get upset with you, they don't look at you. They don't want you to touch them. Your cat gets annoyed by you. And sometimes they'll leave little special treats in your favorite shoes because how dare you leave them for a moment in time? Okay? Exactly. So, and obviously children, I don't know why they just thought they were just blobs until they became adults. But then, like I said, we finally started to move towards science because they asked the question why with functionalism. And the last early psychological theory and the most famous, the one that we will be talking about so many different times, is a theory, it's the perspective, it's a form of therapy, and that is psychoanalysis by our dear friend Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was a wild individual. You know what? All of them, all of the early theorists have wild backgrounds, and maybe I'll do just a quick lecture on some of them because to them, drugs that are considered illegal now would be perfect for therapy. Okay? It's very wild. So, psychoanalysis by our friend Sigmund Freud was about 1856 to about 1939, and he was a neurologist, and his distress was due to conflicts, and emotional traumas that happened in early childhood that were too threatening to remember. Okay? So think about that. There was some type of trauma that happened in your early childhood, some type of negative thoughts that you had, and it was too threatening to remember. So for psychoanalysis, those memories were suppressed, but then it comes back and is manifested in your adulthood. So it explains your behaviors in adulthood. So again, thank you everybody for joining me for Psych 101 here at HillmanTok. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you for the likes. So that's why I said this syllabus is going to be a working document because we are not going to get through all the information. Again, everybody's welcome to ask questions in the chat, and I'll try to answer as much as I can. I also did say something that I will never want to say in my actual lectures is that you're not required to get the book is a great thing to have, and you always can reference it back. Which is why so many adults regress to childlike behaviors. Yes, and thank you for using the word regress. We will talk about that. That is a defense mechanism. Regression. We'll talk about that. But it's a great example as to why. Now, Freud, he added a sexual aspect to all of his theory, so it went kind of wild to the left. I don't even think I can say what he was saying on TikTok. I'm going to have to think about this hard on how I'm going to say it. But either way, it's, desires for a caregiver that you're biologically related to. Sorry, what's the book called? The book is Psychology. It's not a fancy name, but it is in the syllabus, which is in my link tree. It's the first link on my link tree. Where can we find studies to read? Studies can be read in any peer-reviewed journal. So you can put the Annual Review of Psychology, Journal of Psychology, basically any of those. If you are currently in school, more than likely you have access to a library from your school. If not, please sign up for your library card at your local library, because a lot of times you then have access to journals electronically through your library card, or I know nobody wants to do it, but physically go into your library and they have all those journals there for you to pull. But it's easier to always do the Google search. Some articles might be free to access, some of them are behind a paywall. Okay, so there's controversy on if you can't handle the trauma, does that then manifest as a disorder? Does it manifest as dissociative identity disorder? How does it manifest? So it really depends on the individual. And also keep in mind, I like to say this all the time to everybody. I'm gonna need everybody to pull up to the front. Our View for Life, thank you so much. Pull up to the front, everybody. Your parents could have schizophrenia and bipolar. You could live in an environment that is the most negative and toxic. You could be, every negative thing that could possibly happen could happen to you. But we have a term in psychology called resilience. And despite all of that, despite all the statistics that say you will not achieve, you are able to overcome it. Okay? Because you have resilience. So it does not matter the traumas that you've been through, you were still able to keep going. So please keep that in mind, that no matter what I say in any of this, no matter what anybody might say against you or about you, you have resilience and you are able to overcome it. Okay? Please keep that in mind. Always. Don't assume that just because something negative happened to you that there's no hope. Resilience. I'm always going to stress that, especially for all my people of color, especially with everything we're going through right now. Resilience. We can overcome it. Okay? All right. That's not a word. That's a word right there. Okay. Wrote resilience in all caps. I know that's right. Yes. And that is a scientific psychology term. Okay? So keep that in mind. So one thing about psychoanalysis is the term, we talk about the conscious and the unconscious mind, and Freud came up with the term the mental iceberg. And what the mental iceberg is, so imagine you draw the iceberg, think of the Titanic, and you got this big iceberg. And on the top, you see some of the ice, and at the bottom, as you know, of any iceberg, it can go on for miles underneath. Trauma in life, and I'm still resilient. I know that's right, Hammy. I know that's right. And when you think of it that way, so the iceberg, you got a little bit up top, you have the ocean, and then at the very bottom is all this that's left. So that is what the mental iceberg is. The very top is your conscious awareness. Again, this is in psychoanalysis by Freud. The very top is your conscious awareness, what you're aware of and how you're acting. Underneath is your unconscious mind. Those your unrevealed wishes, your passions, your guilty secrets, all of those things that you are not aware of, but they're having an impact on your life. That is psychoanalysis. Okay? And obviously it is also a therapy, and Sigmund Freud has become a household name. Everybody's aware of Sigmund Freud. Sometimes they'll mention him and his information will not be shared correctly. And I try not to get on Twitter and like tweet TV shows. They're like, you're not even using the term correctly. And I'm going to bring it up again. I can't even say next week because we're going to still be in this. I'm going to bring it up again. So all right. I know where I'm going to stop. I'm going to talk about the 5 psychological perspectives. So those were the historical theories. Historical theories. But we moved away from that. We've evolved from that. And instead, we are now on to the 5 major psychological perspectives. So this is a school of thought that really became more prevalent and is used today. So again, thank you everybody for the likes. I truly appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing the live. Welcome to HillmanTok University. Again, my name is Professor White, teaching Psych 101, and I'm really enjoying because I am such a psychology nerd. So this is so much fun to share this information with all of you. And if you're just now joining, that's okay. I will share this information on my YouTube, and therefore you can rewatch it at your leisure as well. And then take, additional notes. So 5 major psychological perspectives, and that is now the more modern day school of thought. Your first one is your biological perspective, which focuses on bodily events that affect your behavior, feelings, and thoughts. Will you post the PowerPoint for today and next week so we can access both at all times? Yes. We'll still be on the same PowerPoint. I'll make a Google Drive for the PowerPoints. Yes. Youngles, if you're still here, please remind me to make a Google Drive for the PowerPoint, because I'll forget. Or if any of you, once I post the video on my YouTube, just comment that I'll remember, because I work my 9 to 5 in social services, and then I'm also a professor and I'm teaching 2 classes, and then I'm also the founder of the BIPOC Streamer Awards, which were celebrating BIPOC creators, and then I'm a streamer. So, and I still have to work out because I'm old and I need to keep myself alive. So please remind me. Yes, my YouTube handle is Fangirl Review, right underneath my name. Busy. I know that's probably, I could diagnose myself with something because of idle hands is the devil's playground. I just keep myself busy. So biological perspective, bodily events. And you're asking me what does that mean? So think of it this way. If you become severely dehydrated, drink your water. Y'all drunk your water? Everybody drink their water. If you become severely dehydrated, it will affect your ability to function. You might start hallucinating. You're stumbling around. You'll appear drunk. It is a bodily event, that's affecting your behavior, feelings, and thoughts. Okay, severe high fevers, sodium levels being off, all of those different ways. And kind of from that, you get evolutionary psychology, but it's all about those biological events and how they then affect your behavior. right? So that's pretty straightforward. That makes perfect sense. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for the gifts. And thank you, everybody, for the likes. I appreciate you. Thank you for the shares as well and getting this information out there. Again, the YouTube is Fangirl Review, and I'll make sure to have that information available to you. Okay. Biological perspective, number 1. Number 2 is your learning perspective. So we're probably going to end the stream after we go through all 5. And I really appreciate all of you for being here. So the learning perspective is concerned with how the environment and experience affect a person's actions. So it's all about the consequences of your behaviors. So you learned how to interact with the environment around you and things of that sort. So basically, classic. Your mom tells you the stove is hot. Don't touch the stove. Don't touch the stove. What do we do as children? We touch the stove. Why? Because we have to explore our environment around us, and we're not necessarily going to listen because we're just hard-headed. I've touched the stove. I burned my fingers so many times as a child because I just had to experience things as myself. Or maybe it was intrusive thoughts. I don't know. Either way, I burnt myself a million times because I had to experience it. You can't tell me that don't touch it because I got to touch it. And that was the consequence of that behavior, was then to be burned. And I learned to not touch the stove. I learned to not touch the hot pan. As a black girl, y'all remember the hot combs, had to touch that. And then like the little stove, what were those things called? What are those curlers called? The nice metal ones. And they go into that little hot stove at the beauty salon. They told me, don't touch it. Okay. Burnt my fingers. Marcel's, right? Right? Am I saying that right? Thank you, called, chosen, and faithful. First of all, I love that name. Yes, had to touch it. Consequences of my behavior. I burnt my fingers. But I learned. Don't touch it. So that is the learning perspective. It's all about what you learn from your behaviors and the consequences of those behaviors. Now, some of them are positive. You can learn positive things. It doesn't always have to be a negative. However, for me, I had to constantly touch things that were hot. I don't know. I don't know. We could probably go deep into my own psyche about that. I don't know. So that's 2. 3, cognitive perspective is how people reason, remember, understand language, solve problems, explain experiences. It's basically your IQ, your intelligence quotient. We could talk about more of that later on, but it's basically how you understand the world around you. So, which is very interesting. And I know we can talk about IQ tests and things like that, but we can dive into that later. I just really want to get through this information. Let me see, make sure. But yeah, so it's how your thoughts and experience affect your actions and choices. So depending on going on the whole nature and nurture debate, and depending on your personal take on the environment around you, it's going to affect how you decide to do things. All right. That's 3. 4, sociocultural perspective. So this focuses on the social and cultural forces outside the individuals. So basically your cultural norms, what you have learned, the impact of those cultural norms on your behaviors. So there's certain cultural norms of how we're supposed to act. Those social rules, that is this particular perspective. So with that in mind, before we get into our last one, what are some cultural norms or social norms and rules that you grew up with? Some of them for me and my family, it is understood that when you walked into the house, you had to greet everybody. And It's usually a, kiss on the cheek. I know a lot of other cultures also have that same, no stimming. Yeah. Everybody else also had that same, norm. And it was hard when I was a case manager. And as a case manager going into some of these homes, 'cause I was an own home case manager, and I would go into the homes and meet with the families. And some of them, like, they would lean in to give me the hug. And I'm like, oh, no, wait, I know that's my norm culturally. I know that's your norm culturally, but we can't do that. I am on the clock. I am, representing the agency. I cannot do that. So that's one cultural norm. Another one could be not to sweep somebody's feet. Things of that. In Korea, you were supposed to wait until the third asks to say yes to something. So I have to ask you 3 times, young girls. Come inside when the street lights come on. So there's so many cultural norms that we grew up with. We in Jamaica, everybody, you see, you need to greet with good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. That's another one. I had to say good morning or good evening. So there's so many norms that we have learned. Not allowed in the kitchen past a certain time. Once that kitchen is clean, you do not go in there. The kitchen is closed. Yes. And yes, the light over the sink is the night light, and it never gets turned off. My apologies, just writing notes. No, this one is under the socio-cultural perspective. Artie, please, anytime, always ask, never apologize. I say this to my students in class. Always stop me and ask where we're at, because then it helps me understand. Children are seen, not heard. Ooh, that's a good one. Stay out of grown folks' business. This is a grown folk conversation. Sometimes my partner will ask if I want a snack, but only has asked once. I'm gonna have to tell your partner to please ask Youngo 2 times, 2 more times, so that they can then say yes. And the last perspective, please, you still keep dropping those cultural norms. There's so many out there that I'm totally even forgetting. The last one is the psychodynamic perspective. Oh, know your place. That's a good one. So the last perspective is the psychodynamic perspective. Okay, so this one deals with the unconscious dynamics within the individual, such as the inner forces, conflicts, or instinctual energy. And what that means is we're going back to the unconscious. So this perspective is based in psychoanalysis. It is based on Sigmund Freud's original theory, but it takes a lot out of a lot of that sexual energy thing that he was constantly trying to make work. We're gonna go through his theory, especially his theory of development, and then you'll see how out there he went with this theory. But basically, we all can admit that events in childhood can affect your adulthood. We're going to talk about attachment theory and Artie, very much so. We're gonna explore all of that. But there is some aspect to those unconscious dynamics in which you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. However, therapy can work with you. And some of that. Did someone tell me the third one again? Yeah, no problem. That is the, cognitive perspective? Yes. So you got the 5. I'm gonna say it again. The 5 are, my camera is a fancy camera. I apologize. Oh no, don't. I'm gonna tell y'all, don't make me fuss at y'all. Always ask the questions. So, 5, biological perspective, learning perspective, cognitive perspective, sociocultural perspective, and the psychodynamic. Please never feel shy about asking questions. It is very much a safe space here. Please ask. Always ask. Okay? How much more do we have of this particular part? Oh, no. Yeah, okay. So we're going to stop there. The definition of psychodynamic is all about those unconscious dynamics within the individual that drives those inner forces and conflicts. I had to learn. Okay, wait, hold on. Hammy, I had to learn how to wash, cook, and clean. All Jamaican boys and girls had to know how to do that. Listen. My grandfather, he was Jamaican. And let me tell you, we all know how to cook. We all know how to clean. My older brother's not the best at it, bless his heart. But everybody in my family knows how to cook. Okay, so thank you so much. So we're gonna end it there. I appreciate everybody. Next week, I might move the lecture to Wednesday just because I have something on Tuesday that just got scheduled, because usually my Tuesdays are free. So we're going to probably just move it to Wednesday. Again, I'll post more videos to remind everybody that we're going to move it to Wednesday. I will update the syllabus so you know, because Tuesday things get scheduled. So I'm always going to do that. I'm going to post a video. Thank you for the rose. I appreciate that. What Sosa? So thank you. And next week, we're going to talk about careers in psychology, some of those terms of a psychologist versus psychiatrist versus a therapist versus a psychoanalyst. What do those all mean? And then we're going to get into the research. So we're going to get a little mathy, not too heavy math, because this is not a statistics class, and I could teach you a statistics class because I love statistics. But so we're not going to get too mathy with it. So it's going to be math for psych majors. And after this, I will post this lecture on the YouTube, so make sure you're following. And I love this. I'm so happy, Indy. I'm so happy to hear that. Yes. So I'm going to make sure I understand. Yep. So we're going to talk about careers in psychology. So you guys can ask a lot of questions about that. And then we're going to jump into research. Yeah. So, it's going to end up being, so that would be chapter 2. So as always, I'm going to make sure I answer as many questions as possible, but make sure thank you so much, Young Girls, the mod with the mostest. I appreciate you. Follow the YouTube Fangirl Review. Link is right in my link tree. I think it's even a little button on my TikTok, and that's where the lecture will be. So if you missed something or you came in late, I totally understand that. That is a great place to get that information. So everybody, thank you so much. I truly appreciate all of you. Enjoy your night, and I'll see you next week, Wednesday. We're going to say again at 8 p.m.? 8 p.m. EST. This is a great hour, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And I am Professor White here at HillmanTok University, and that was your first lecture in Psych 101. All right, everybody, until we meet again, bye. And end. Okay.